Hey, hi, and hello. I'm coming to you today from the working side of my desk because I am going through a bunch of comic books and I'm thinking about grading and whether to grade or not to grade. As you've heard in the past, I've talked a lot about going on Facebook and doing a sale on Facebook, which I am planning to do. You probably all saw the reel where I showed the secret stash of vintage comics, Silver Age, Bronze Age comics that I found in the storage unit. And I figured those would be the first comics that I would do this Facebook sale around. So I pulled them out and I'm going through them. And one of the things I realized as I was sort of researching and watching some of these other people who are selling comics through Facebook is there is a lot of focus on grading. And I am not a person who has spent a lot of time thinking about grading. I mean, I really don't. It was never that important to me as a collector. I was never a hunter and never like a serious, I'm collecting this as an investment to retire on. I always bought and collected comics for the joy of reading them and enjoying them. So finding the absolute best near mint copy of a Silver Age book or a Bronze Age book is an aspect of the comic collecting world that I've just never really been that engaged with. And here's the thing, like, I think it's totally cool. Like, I think that people who do it, it's their passion. They've really learned a lot about it. They do their research. It's almost like an investigation thing or a detective thing, or a hunt. And, you really take it very seriously. And somebody might take, 30 or 40 minutes and really just break down a book and not break it down, but, look at it very carefully to determine, what the exact grade is, right? I've also never gotten into the whole getting your comics professionally graded and slabbed. Someday I will do a separate video on that. I think that there are a lot of valid reasons for getting your book slabbed. It's never been a preference of mine. It's not something that's really been something that's been important to me. And yeah, I do judge some of the slabbing that happens. But for the most part, my collection has been buying things that are brand new from a pull list. So almost everything I have is really in that sort of near mint condition, right? Been read once, put in a bag and board, and stored properly. So I've never really concerned myself really that much with grading. Every now and then I'll be at a comic convention, and I might buy some back issues, or I might be at the thrift store and I might buy some back issues. I think that's where most of this came from. Or I might, one day I was at a comic convention and there was a whole box of adventure comics that had a ton of Legion of Superhero stuff in it. I didn't care what condition it was in. As long as I could read it, I was happy as a little clam. So again, this is just my way of saying I am not even an amateur grader. I have sort of my gut grade that I go with. And back in the day, I would read the Overstreet grading guide. And this was before CGC existed, and they would have in the price guide, they would have like a couple of pages on grading, right? You remember that? And they would have that little owl card that had like the different colors that the pages could be. But grading was pretty, simple. There was the basic categories of mint, which almost no comic book was ever found to be in that condition. Near mint, very fine, fine, very good, good, which was not terribly good at all, fair, and poor, right? And then people got to refining those, right? So then you'd get into, very good minus, very good plus, very fine minus. So there was like at each level, there was like even finer gradients of what each of these things meant and what you were supposed to look at in order to determine that, right? And then now we have, I guess it's CGC that sort of launched it, but we have an even more refined system where you get into things that are like 8.5, 9.0, 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, and everybody's looking for their grail in a 9.8. And I just literally, I don't know, a lot of things. I don't have the patience for that. I don't have the time for that. And I don't really have the interest in engaging in that level of grading my books in order to just move them along. When I sat down to like refresh my memory of, all the different grading, aspects, and I started looking at these books, and they're great books, they're wonderful books. And I'm, going online, and I'm like, what are the current grading charts, the rubrics, and there are so many. I mean, something from, this one might be my favorite. This one is no, not that one. Hang on a second. See, there's so many of them. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here we've got this real basic one. And I'll have Marlo cut it in here, but it basically is qualitative, right? It's like perfect, nearly perfect, extraordinary, excellent, above average, average, reading copy. It doesn't tell you how those things are defined. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of a gut check. Okay, we like that one. Then there is this one that has 10,000, and I'm, obviously kidding, but kind of not kidding. All these different, things you have to look for, and the different measurements down to the quarter of an inch or whatever of a crease or of a tear or whatever. How many ticks can you have on the spine? How many color breaks? What is a color break? That's a pretty highly detailed one. Then there is this other one, which is kind of more like a, these are the things that really shift, which I think is kind of helpful. Like, if you have, if the cover is completely detached, it can never be more than a 4. If it's detached by one staple, it can never be more than a 6. If there's a quarter size piece missing, it can never be more than a 4, right? So those give you some, real sort of hard and fast rules. I don't know how many people believe in these rules, but hey. But like this kind of killed me. Like you could have a 1-inch tear in the interior, and it says that's a 9.0 max. So that assumes, I think, that everything else is pretty much near mint condition. And with a 1-inch tear on the inside, you could still have it be a 9.0, which is, near mint minus or whatever. You could have a centerfold that's detached at one staple, and it could still be a 9.0. I don't know if I believe that, but then here's another one that is that tries to kind of put everything in a kind of more of a flow sheet sort of a thing. Again, I'll have you guys can't see this. I'll have Marlo cut them in there because Marlo's good at that sort of thing. But here, this one really breaks it down. Again, you're looking at corners, you're looking at creases, you're looking at tears, you're looking at all of these things. It gives you the interior color page scale.
Okay, you're good to go.
And then it kind of gives you at least a range of things that, but here you're basically supposed to be scoring each of these things. And then you figure out where it is on this graph, right? So you're supposed to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different categories of things to assess, and then determine it based on what looks to be about, 20, 25 criteria. And then I guess you add up the score and you figure out what range it is. Yeah, that looks like it would take a lot of time. This one by Nukedia.com, don't know who they are, never heard of them, tried to look them up on the internet, nothing. But it was at least more straightforward. Like it was, looking at the staples, looking at the inside pages, is it flat? Check the corner, check the cover, check the corners, check the gloss on the cover, is it clean? And it at least simplifies it. This is kind of the one that I'm using as my, my rubric, because these other ones, it's funny, or maybe it's not funny to you, but, and again, I don't want to be dismissing anyone who really cares or is passionate about grading.
You turn the page, you wash your hands. You turn the page, you wash your hands. And then you turn the page.
That is a big and important part of the whole comic collecting joy and experience and hobby. That's definitely true. But we've all been to the comic shop where, they employ one standard for the books they're buying and a different standard for the books that they're selling, right? When I've been, I'm looking at selling these books, and if I spent the time it would take to grade meticulously each one of these books, it would take me forever. Like literally, like to go through that one scale of, 10 to, and again, maybe I'll get better at it, but I'm pretty sure that I can look at a book, like this Tales of, sorry, something just fell over. This Tales of Suspense, and I can take a look at it, and I can look at the spine, I can look at the staples, I can look at the cover, I can look at the corners, I can kind of look at the gloss on the cover, I can see that there's creases, and I can pretty much just from a gut tell you I think that this falls into the sort of very good to fine category. And I'm comfortable with that. If somebody else wants to, and of course I would, flip it over and I'd look at the back also, and I'd look at all the pages with something like this. I'd look at all the pages and make sure they're all here and none of the coupons have been cut out and that there are no major tears, but there aren't any. There's a little bit of looseness, here, but the staples are here. It's pretty flat. There's a lot of spine wear. There's several, creases on the cover. There's a little bit of a crease here on the cover, but actually the corners are pretty good. There's a little bit of spine roll, but not much. The color inside is still, I think, very good, very vibrant. I'd put the color of the pages. Where's that little guide? Where's that little thing? I don't believe that this is in any way, shape, or form accurate, but I'd put this at almost an off-white or cream. I probably honestly would have called it a light tan or tan, but that's just me. You can open it up here to the centerfold. The staples are still intact. There's no rusting. There's a little bit of creasing here on the inside. And there's a little bit of writing here on the front. And it's very interesting. This kind of writing that probably was done by the store when they put this thing out on the stands. It's usually a date or a stamp, or sometimes a date and a stamp that basically just indicates when it went out on the rack. Those are pretty much considered to be acceptable markings on a book because it was so common. But anyway, I'm going to walk through a few of these, tell you what I think they are. You guys can totally disagree with me. I would love it if you got in the comments and shared what your thoughts are. But yeah, let's just kind of dig in and see how well I do. Okay, so here we have Marvel Spotlight on The Son of Satan. So this is Marvel Spotlight number 12. This is actually the first appearance, I think, of Damon Hellstrom. Probably would not get published today just because of the title, but anyway. So again, I'm going to just sort of do kind of an overview. And one of the first things I see when I'm looking, there's good shine on the cover still, but there's a lot of what I think of as sort of like this sort of dimpling, or, there's some creases and things like that in the cover. I know that some people do pressing now, and maybe that's something that would be corrected through pressing. I don't know. Let me know if you think so. And there's kind of a pretty significant crease there on that corner. To me, again, it's just a gut thing without looking at the rest of the book. That immediately takes it out of the very fine. Whoops, sorry, I'm just wandering around with the camera here because I'm a pro. Maybe some other people would put it a little bit higher, but to me, that immediately kind of just puts this book into the fine category. We look at the corners. They're otherwise, there's a little crease up there. The corners are pretty square. They're pretty decently cut. There's a little bit of spine roll here, or, bindery thing where the spine is not, and the staples are a little bit bent up. That staple's fine. But the staples look good. The cover's well attached. The back is pretty much in the same kind of situation with a little bit of a crease here. That same kind of like dimpling, kind of creasing here. A little bit of a crease on that corner. And here you can see where that spinal roll kind of creates a little bit of a misalignment of the pages. So there's that. Color on the cover is still very, very good, I think. If we look at the spine actually doesn't have as many like immediately visible ticks and color breaks on this side, partly because the white goes so far around. But if we look at it a little bit more carefully from the front, you know, we begin to see some, this is hard to do, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. We see a little, you know, color breaks here, some ticks here. You know, this is the kind of, you know, spinal wear, that's actually what I have, you know, that we would expect. Now, the one thing that you'll notice that doesn't come off, like if I was just to take a picture of this like this, you wouldn't see it. But if you look down here, there is a tear in that cover. Now, I almost missed it, actually, honestly, when I was flipping through this. Darn it. Hang on. It's actually easier to see from the inside. So there is a tear. There's actually 2 tears in the cover. You know, it looks to be, oh, there it goes. Yeah, so that one's about 1 inch long. The other one's probably about 1/4 of an inch long. So obviously that really affects the value of the book. Color on the inside is good. The pages are very supple. There are no other major issues with the interior of the book. You look at the inside, you look at those little staples. They look to be in good condition. But obviously, at least for me, that tear is a big issue. So I would put this, you know, maybe other people would disagree with me, but I would put this firmly in the sort of very good plus, or if it didn't have that tear, I'd probably put it in the fine category. But with that tear, I think it's probably very good plus. Maybe other people disagree. What do you think? Okay, so let's take a look at this Marvel Spotlight Captain Marvel, which I think is from 1979 or something like that. So, you know, we just kind of pick it up. We look over here at the corners. Corners look pretty sharp, looking pretty good there. Okay, this line is actually a printed line across the barcode. Apparently back then that meant it was a direct market edition, like so it was sold through comic shops and not through the newsstand. So you distinguished it from that. If you look at here, you know, it's got really good, you know, color and gloss on the cover. I'm not seeing a lot. This is kind of what I do if I'm trying to find like any sort of like big creases or smudges or anything like that. So it's got really nice shine, I think. Looking at the back, you know, these white backs all kind of look kind of dirty to me, but I don't know, not too bad. Here we have a little bit of blunting on that edge. We have a little bit of divoting here. The corners generally look okay. Now you see here where you see a bit of the color from the cover here. That kind of indicates a little bit of spine roll or bindery issue. I'm not seeing, normally if it was a real spine roll, you'd see a lot of the side of the pages. So I'm guessing that was more of a bindery issue than actual spine roll from wear and tear. Now, this is the hard part. You got to look at the spine. You got to do it without actually creating any problems. And this is where you want to look for what they call spine ticks, or I don't know, somebody has a word for it that's probably better than that, but you're looking for little, whoops, my chair's about to fall out from underneath me. Like right there, you see where there's like a little bit of a crease in the cover and it affects the color. You can see a couple of them right here too. Right, so those are sort of the spine ticking. But then we also want to kind of look at the staples, and the staples are in very good condition. Where's the other one? I don't know if you can get that. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty tight. Then I would open it up. Sorry, I'm trying to do this single-handedly. You know, kind of look at the interior cover. Again, I think that the color is very good. I mean, to me, that's sort of like I don't know if I would call it off-white, but it's definitely like a cream. Let me pause for a second and flip to the centerfold. Okay, so looking here on the centerfold, again, you can see that the color inside is still pretty good. You know, here we're looking at the staples. The staples still look pretty good. I'm not seeing, you know, any sort of major like water damage or discoloration. But I did notice this. I don't know if you can see it. Oops, sorry. Just get back to that page. So this is really hard to see. I put a little piece of white paper underneath it so you can see it a little bit better. You see that right there is a little bit of a, like somebody poked a hole through it with a pencil or something. This is the only like, yeah, there you can see it a little bit better, which obviously is a bummer because it's on, you know, a page of art. But that's really the only significant issue of this comic. And I would say that in this condition, I would very comfortably put this at a very fine plus. What do you think? Well, there's no hidden gems here. There's some wonderful comics. I'm going to go get myself a little something to drink, and then I am going to get back to work. I hope you all have a great week.